Om Shanti, and welcome to this special conversation on the topic From Getting to Giving. And to discuss this, we have our guest from UK, Brother Nevile Hodgkinson. Neville has been a writer and author specializing in science and medical writing, and for several years he has worked as a journalist in London Times and Sunday Times in the UK. And he's also been practicing Raj Yoga for around 37 years. Om Shanti, and welcome to the studio.
Om Shanti.
Very happy to see you once again.
It's very nice to be here, in Delhi too.
Neville, when we talk about giving and getting, of course when we look around the world, everything and everyone seems to be wanting to take, and it's difficult to give. Why do you think that's happening? And why should we actually give and not take? And for a logical mind, why shouldn't I take if I'm getting?
Well, it's true that in the world today, nearly everybody is trying to get, and giving is quite limited, perhaps to your immediate family or something like that. And even there, very often there's a neediness present rather than true giving. You know, you might want your children to be a credit to you. You might want your husband to do what you want him to do, rather than really giving him that freedom, or the wife in the same way. And so it's very widespread, absolutely true, that that this lack of giving, and yet does that make us happy? No. Really, I think, because I now understand through Raja Yoga, I just heard it as an idea initially, but in time I've really understood it, I think, that the intrinsic nature of the human being is giving. It's humane, as our name implies. It's just that over time, as the world has got more and more complicated and made more and more demands on us, our true giving nature became compromised. There's no one to blame for it. It's just something that happened. But it has got worse and worse. I've got a friend in London who, when he sees about some new scandal of corruption or, you know, deceit, he says, well, we live in a kleptocracy. And you know, a kleptomaniac is someone who can't stop stealing. Klepto means stealing. So a kleptocracy is one where the people who can steal the most rise to the top. And it's a bit like that. He's saying it as a bit of a joke, but it's also a bit like that. And so that's why I think it's because things have got so complicated, and in order to survive in such a complicated world, especially in politics, which is such a, you know, tough field to work in, that this taking has become predominant.
And not just in politics, it's, I think, everywhere.
It's true. It's true. For example, in medicine, a field that I've worked very closely with for more than 30 years, not as a doctor, but as an observer of the field, and I see how doctors and other health workers have very good intentions, and yet those get compromised sometimes by the commercial pressures that they face. You know, that they're told by big pharmaceutical corporations that they should prescribe more of their products, and perhaps really what is better for the patient is that they should learn how to live some skills which are not saleable, though. So, you know, the things that really might help people are often put on one side, while products and operations and other health interventions that have a price on them, those are the things that get emphasized. So again, that's one field where I've seen it very clearly, how good intentions are there, but they become mixed with these other factors.
You know, Neville, you talked about that our intrinsic nature is humane, that is to give. But if you tell it to a common man, they'll probably, I don't know, might not agree or agree. Take for instance, if someone is getting anything for free, you go to a supermarket and you buy one and you get one free, even if it is of very small value, you feel so happy that I'm getting this.
Yes.
It doesn't matter what it is, even if it's just a sponge, doesn't matter. It's happiness in getting. But if I have to shell out anything, if it's even a few rupees or a few dollars more, or even if I have to shell out my time, I feel burdened. So these days, for a common person, the feeling is in getting there is lightness, but in giving there's a lot of burden. What do you have to say on that?
Well, you're absolutely right. I do see the world in that same way. But I see it with a lot of sympathy, because I was very much in that same position myself, and I am still to some degree, you know, that if I see something's free and it's a genuine bargain, I'll be pleased about that. But I think that two factors are involved here. One is our neediness, you know, that we become very needy, and I think that that has to do with a lack of wisdom about how to emerge this higher nature that I'm now convinced is a truth about us, but which, as you say, the common man might really wouldn't form a part of his general discussion or thinking, because we're faced with so many examples of people around us, even what seem like normal and decent people, but still they are wanting to take and make sure that they're comfortable and all the rest of it. So that's one factor, this neediness, and I hope to be able to convey, because this is one of the big things that has shifted in me, from being very needy to being, thanks to the spiritual practice that I was introduced to by the Brahma Kumaris, I've learned how to nourish myself much more in a way that doesn't make demands on other people, because it happens more internally. And this has been an amazing gift. It's really shifted my attitude and approach to life in a lot of different ways. So the other thing in this area is that people are needy because we're in such a complicated world where so many demands are made on us, and so you have to put some limits. It feels like you have to put some limits on your giving, even if your nature is to be giving. You, after a while, you think, well, if I give endlessly, then I shall give everything away and there'll be nothing of me left. You know, I'll just be exhausted and a wreck.
Exactly. This is what you know, happens, that people say that if in this world, if I start to give, then I'll be taken for a ride, and you'll have people misusing my resources. And that is the time where, even if there is the good intention to give, or the resources, material or otherwise, people just close themselves and stop giving.
I would say that a part of my strategy for coping with this difficult world previously was to be a people pleaser. You know, some people are quite happy, their survival strategy is to be bullying, to get what they want by being insistent, you know, do this for me, you know, I want you to over here, you know. And some people, they have this very authoritative way with them, and they do that well, and so they manage to play their role in that way. But other people, there's a sort of spectrum, I think, from bullying down to the other end where you're passive, you know, and you want to please. And this is also a survival strategy, because it's like by being a people pleaser, you think that you'll get someone powerful on your side. So, you know, you're trying to agree with them so that they will help you underneath. That's the approach. But people pleasing is just as much of a weakness, of a selfishness, as being bullying, actually, but just a different way into it.
Different way of putting it.
Yeah, exactly. And so when I realised this, I thought, well, my nature wasn't to be bullying. My nature was more people pleasing, and I used to think that that was better than bullying, but it isn't. It's just as bad, but in a different way. It's like manipulative. So what has gradually changed in me is that instead of being so people-pleasing, now I'm more able to, where as a human being, by which I mean, you know, with weaknesses as well as with that humanity, where I've got some needs to assert myself in some way, I don't mind if I upset someone. I don't want to upset them, but if somebody considers that my behaviour has troubled them a bit, okay, it's not such a big deal. Let me find out whether that was their interpretation, whether it was a misunderstanding, or whether I had been unpleasant. But I don't mind so much. And that's a big change, actually, in me. Big relief.
You know, we've been talking about giving and getting. The two things which are very important. Number one, why should I give? And number two, from where do I get the strength to give all the time? Because the thing is that I can be giving some people some of the time, but not all of them all the time. So these two things, if you could clarify on.
Well, why be giving? I think probably everyone can recognise that when they are at their happiest, when they feel most themselves, is when they're feeling relaxed, and they don't feel as if they are having to manipulate, they don't feel as if they're having to bully, they could just feel as if they're with friends and family, and they feel at ease. And we feel that when we're happiest like that. So there are times when we experience that, but the secret of life seems to be to learn how to extend those periods, so that instead of just feeling at home when I'm with a few friends, feeling, you know, at ease when I'm with a few friends, I should learn how to expand my givingness so that I feel at ease with wider and wider circles. But to do that, you do also have to learn how to sustain yourself in a different way, because otherwise, like you say, everything will be sucked out of you, and you'll end up an empty shell, and angry probably too, because you feel you've been taken advantage of. So the big shift for me, which I'm so grateful to have learned, is that there is actually this divinity to us, that there is a core to our being where it's non-physical. Normally our taking nature comes because we have to protect the physical. I want to stay alive, I need food to eat. You know, I have a family to protect, I have a job where I need to earn money. Those things are fine, we need to do those everyday things. But deep inside there is this aspect to me that is eternal and non-physical, the soul, in contrast to the body. And this is an understanding that really in the UK, most of Europe, perhaps all over the world really, even though in the East and in India especially, spirituality is still very much a part of life, but here too often it seems like it's more at the level of just understanding something with the intellect. I mean, yes, of course there's an aspect to me that is the soul, but not really
experiencing it. Experiencing
it and knowing that you are that, you know, that you're not actually Neville the grandpa or Neville the journalist or the writer or BK. None of these things. I'm actually something that is beyond all of those. And when, through the meditative practices that I've learned, I find that I can connect to that inner being, and then it's like I get on the same wavelength as the divine, and it's as if I'm plugging in to a battery that is a fully charged battery always, and I'm able, when I make that connection internally, it's as if a power enters me and fills me with this truth, is really about the only word that encompasses it all, a truth about my giving nature. So then my neediness and the greed and the gettingness that previously was distressing me actually when I was in that needy state, that gradually fades away and you become more giving. It makes such a difference. It made a big difference to me in my work, because previously in the earlier part of my career I was really quite ego-driven. You know, I worked hard, but every time I got a good show in the newspaper, I feel great, you know. Then the next day my story might be spiked by the editor, and I would be like the spike had gone through me, I would be deflated. So up and down, very stressful. But after I started to practice this Raja Yoga, then because I was meeting my needs through the meditative, reflective practice, that was somehow, then I had a more giving approach with my work. Of course I'd be happy if I got a good show in the paper, but it wouldn't be so extreme. Those ups and downs were much less. And that was very helpful to me actually. Same with my relationships. I used to have a lot of neediness in my relationships, not ego, but dependency, I would say. And thanks to these practices, I feel as if with my family, I've become more giving. You know, I love being with them, I love sharing, but it's not that if I'm not with them, I'll feel a hollow in my heart. You know, that's really changed. It's very liberating.
You know, so as you say that it's about the spiritual practice, your understanding that I am that being, I am the soul. There is a soul, there's a difference in there is a soul, and experiencing that I am that one.
Yes.
And then connecting with the higher being.
Yes.
Which opens up and opens us to give rather than get. And it seems more like an intention to give, because it need not be something physical, it need not be some physical resource that I have.
No.
It is more, it seems, as the intention, something that drives me, that is driving me along the life of what is my attitude to give or to get.
That's
is
very
that right?
true. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, it is like that. So it's not that you become a do-gooder. You know, a do-gooder, that could just be another form of ego, actually. But it's more that because you have this increasing fullness, it's a lifelong journey to remove your neediness and be more giving, but you make progress. And the more you move along that route towards remembering that you have come from that divine source, that you have those qualities that we remember as God having, originally, of being very giving and very loving and peaceful. When you remember that you've come from that and that is really your true nature, it's as if that charges the battery of your well-being, so that in a very natural way, with other people and with your actions, you're more giving, and you don't have to make demands on others in the same way.
So you're not making demands. You mentioned this thing that being a do-gooder is also a form of ego, and I think it requires some explanation, because to do good, for many, that's the way, and I think you should explain more around that.
Yeah. Well,
how is it ego-driven? I'm doing good.
Yes. To do good, fine. Of course, good actions will bring their own reward, but if you have a consciousness that I'm doing good, that's what we call a do-gooder. It means that.
For example.
It means like. Supposing that I run a charity and I think I'm a very good person because I put all this money into helping blind orphans. I've set up something for these blind orphans. Now, if my heart had seen children in that condition and I had the resources, and so I thought I would love to help these children, then of course from that motive there's nothing but good comes. But if you're doing these things in order that your name should be up there on the school and your
people should think that you're a good person.
Exactly. Then it's another form of taking. Okay, there's some good has been done by your giving, but you're taking as well, and that means that you don't really find the freedom of a limitless joy that comes with an attitude that I'm not giving anyway, I'm just part of life's flow. As soon as you have the thought that I am giving, there's a danger of ego coming in there, and ego is like a brain-based thing. I think of the ego as to do with our social conditioning. Like I want to be a good father, and I'm proud if I'm a good father. Okay, that's a good form of social conditioning that you should want to do that, but on the spiritual journey, you can go beyond even that form of thinking that I'm a good person, and instead, just in a very natural way, you don't feel as if it's qualities that are coming from you. You just more feel that you're in the flow of life and the benevolence that lies behind life, and as if that is what is nourishing your children or your relationships or your work. It sounds like a very high aim, but it's actually very natural and it's liberating. Whereas if you're thinking, I've done so much for my children and how do they repay me? They go out and get on the drugs charge, or they're just off with their friends all the time. You'll start, if you've had that feeling that I was doing good for them and I've done so much for them.
I haven't got the return of it.
Now you want the return of it, and then that creates unhappiness because you're making expectations of them, and then maybe they don't feel that they can meet those expectations, and then relationships start to deteriorate.
Neville, you've been very clear in giving us these examples. Now, for a common person who's probably in a stressful job, who's got a family to take care, there's a family and probably there is a conflict there, who's really very busy, how can he inculcate this attitude of giving through the practice of spirituality in his daily life? What are those very practical tips that you could give to a person, for a common man?
Right. Well, first, just the very thought if you can be attentive to it, of bringing in a thought, let me try and give rather than take. Even that thought, if you keep it at the forefront of your mind, it can help you in stressful situations. So, for example, when I first did a television broadcast, many years back, I was a reporter, and I'd done a big investigation into the dangers of asbestos, and it was the first time that was coming out. And so I was invited on to do a television broadcast about it in British TV, and I was very nervous. It was the first time. And this was before I'd started practicing meditation, but somehow the thought came to me, well, just share what you've got, share the information you've got, don't worry about yourself, just try and give something. And it made such a huge difference to the stress of the situation. Really eased it a lot, because otherwise I was so nervous. And so that's one example. Okay, that's an exceptional situation, but I think in every day, where there are things that cause us stress, if instead of thinking on my way to work, God, what another day is going to hold, is it, is that awful boss going to be unkind to me again, etc., etc. If instead you go into work thinking, I wonder if I could do something to make that boss a little bit happier today, you can make such a difference just with an attitudinal shift like that. And then that's the first step. But then, of course, you need to get the power to do that, because otherwise, when he's unpleasant to you, you'll be unpleasant back, or you'll be hurt as usual. So then you have to start building into your life some regular practice, even a few minutes at the start of the day where you nourish yourself, you plug in your kind of well-being center and let that energy flow into you, and it gives you the strength to go through the day more peacefully and more givingly. And then as you practice that, and of course it takes some time, but as you practice it more, you start to get the feeling that actually benevolence in this difficult world wants to come back. Nature is not nasty, brutish and short, like some philosopher once said. Nature nurtures. Everywhere, nature nurtures. It's just that we've forgotten how to receive that nurturing from nature, which includes the divine. And so when we can align our actions with nature as through consciously practicing it, consciously remembering to be a bit more aware to give when we're in difficult situations especially, charging the battery through a few minutes of meditation at the beginning of the day, review your day at the end and think, oh, I didn't do so well there, but tomorrow I'll do better. Then it's as if you start to get more in line with this beautiful nurturing energy that is invisible but which will sustain you when you move along that track. And so your life starts to transform very easily and naturally.
Neville, it's a great tip that you gave, and especially the way you gave your examples of how the practice of giving and of course after meditation and knowing yourself as the soul and connecting with the divine, how that divinity enables a person to be a natural bestower. You don't have to really stress out. And one of the things you mentioned was your example of whatever I have to give. I need not think about what is going to be the result. In the Gita they say that you do actions but don't think about the results. It's very similar to that, the truth. So thank you very much for sharing your experiences and giving us these really deep insights of how by giving can we get more naturally back and and get back connected to our nature, which is to nurture really, as every nature is. But before we close, just your final thoughts for our audience.
Well, I'm visiting Delhi right now for a conference about envisioning the future through self-change, and I was staying at the Om Shanti Retreat Centre, and I noticed on one of the slogans was, God gives and forgives, man gets and forgets. And I thought to myself, yeah, that's true, that is how we are right now, but it doesn't have to be like that. Because God gives, God can give us the strength to be givers as well. So I'm actually hugely grateful to India, because this spirituality that somehow, even though there's a big muddle around it all today, but there's some core of wisdom here in India which has been carried by the sisters of the Brahmakumaris and other teachers out across the world, and for me it's giving hope of a much better vision of the future. I have a sense that because of this inner beauty that I'm being reconnected to, and that thousands of others are being reconnected to as well, that we will actually, after a while, bring into being, we'll see into being a beautiful world.
Well, thank you so much for your thoughts, and we hope to get this awakening so that everyone is able to see the inner beauty, connect with the divine, and with that make this world beautiful again. Thank you very much, Neville. Om Shanti.
Thank you. Om Shanti.